Hello, children of the night and others. I'm going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, Dracula, and about a big question which has bothered many people. Why, in over 100 years, has there never been a totally faithful movie or TV adaptation? Now, some of you are reading along in the Daily Dracula project, where it's giving you the book as it's happening chronologically, which is great. I've read the book before, but this is such a cool format, and I am so excited to see so many more people discovering my favorite novel. So, we haven't gotten too far into the book yet, but you may be noticing that there are some things that don't really make it into most movie versions. So, let me start at the beginning here. Dracula is written in the 1890s, so only very short experimental movies going on. In Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, which I will talk about later, you actually see them going to a movie theater and just seeing like a couple clips, which stuns everyone. Bram Stoker actually did a lot of theater work, and he did write a script, which I don't believe was ever fully put on, but there was a reading of it. Legend has it that Henry Irving, a stage actor for whom it is believed that he wrote Dracula, or at least it's believed by some, for him to be the starring role. The legend is that he saw this reading and walked out saying, "This is terrible." Some people have disputed that legend, but the first notable Dracula film is, of course, Nosferatu. And unfortunately, despite having seen many, many Dracula movies, this is the only one that I can call unreservedly good. It's also a ripoff, and in fact, Bram Stoker's widow, Florence Stoker, sued them and tried to have the movie destroyed, which, since it's a great movie, many people have vilified her for. But I understand where she's coming from. They were, in fact, ripping off the royalties of something that was her livelihood, and ultimately paid more in court battles than they would have if they'd just given her the damn money. But that's relevant because the Count there, played by Max Schreck, is called Count Orlok, and he is very distinctive. He's served as the model, along with the somnambulist from Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, another silent German horror movie, part of a movement called German Expressionism, kind of served for the model of the sort of, for lack of a better word, goth villain, this sort of very gaunt, very shadowy figure. In the case of Count Orlok, looking very bestial, almost inhuman. You can't imagine him passing, for lack of a better word. Anyway, Nosferatu sort of follows the book. The Jonathan character, Hutter, goes to Orlok's to conduct a business deal. He gets tormented there. Orlok goes to London and spreads plague, drives people mad, preys on women. The Mina character, Ellen, this is a departure from the book, lures him to his death by giving herself to him for an evening, which is very much not a seduction or sex. It is, like I said, he is gross. So unless you're into that, you know what? If you're into that, no shame. But it's really horror. And she lures him to stay with her until the sun rises to kill him. And this is the origin of the depiction of sunlight actually killing the vampire. It doesn't do that in Dracula. It seems to make him weak. He doesn't like to go out. And in earlier mythology, there may be sources that say sunlight kills them, but I've never come across it. It's more sort of like they're nocturnal. You know, an owl, unless it's disturbed, doesn't go out during the daytime, sort of like that. Anyway, Nosferatu, very good movie, partially faithful, but there is a play, however, a play that will have much more influence on movies to come. It's by Hamilton Dean. After a great deal of pestering, he got Florence Stoker to sign off on it, despite it being terrible, which is probably why she didn't want to sign off on it. And it simplifies it, and basically for stage conventions, so you can have like 1 or 2 sets. And they make Dracula not necessarily handsome, but sort of he can pass as a gentleman. And he shows up and he preys on some women, and ultimately the men figure out what's going on and stake him. Not the most exciting stuff. Bela Lugosi stars in the 1931 movie version of it, and it's not a great movie. And I say this with all love for Lugosi, who is actually a better actor than people often give him credit for and got completely screwed over by Hollywood. His performance is interesting. Some people laugh at it or consider it campy or corny, and I think that's just because it's been so imitated by, even the Count on Sesame Street. So it's one of those things where it's hard to watch the original without thinking of all the copies. The other great performances in that movie, and these 3 performances are for me what saved the movie, which, like I said, it's based on a play that in and of itself is not great, and Todd Browning, you can really see how he's sort of doing it as a play. He's not doing interesting camera or movie stuff with. Contrast this with Frankenstein, which came out the same year, but was made by James Whale, a much better film director. But the other great performances are Edward Van Sloan as Van Helsing. I love his Van Helsing. He's like a nice old man, but there's this air of, are you kidding me? When he's dealing with everybody else who's kind of either bland or stupid. And he also has a great moment where Dracula tries to hypnotize him, and it sort of works for a second. And he puts his foot forward, and then he gains control of himself and steps back. It's great. The other great performance is Dwight Frye as Renfield. His Renfield, it's over the top, but you believe it. Or at least I believe it. People have written about how it was also sort of playing off of depictions of PTSD. Remember, this was not long after World War I, and there were a lot of people who came back from the war with serious physical and mental problems that the medical and psychological communities were not necessarily able to deal with at the time. But it's not that close to the book. Again, it consolidates the action. Big change is that it has Renfield go to Transylvania, which is where he goes crazy, instead of Jonathan. And Mina, who in the book is a very active character, she's not very active in the movie. She's sort of a much more typical damsel in distress figure. And from then on, we enter into a game of telephone. Each adaptation starts to copy the previous one. Now, I do want to say that there are some aspects of the book that would be understandably hard to film. If you've read it, it is an epistolary novel, which means it's consisting of letters and diary entries and newspaper clippings sort of put together like a scrapbook. In some ways, this feels like a very modern device. It's a little like found footage, but it was a device in the 1700s that popped up periodically. Other famous works that did this were Dangerous Liaisons and Clarissa, and that's hard to film. If you've ever read the book Misery by Stephen King and seen the movie's mostly pretty faithful, but they can't adapt this whole sequence of the romance novel he's trying to write turning into a gothic horror as his own situation becomes more and more horrific. It's hard to put the process of writing on screen. So I'm sympathetic in that regard. But what you see is people not even trying to adapt the book. And this is a little different than Frankenstein, where there are lots of adaptations that don't stick closely to the book but still kind of hew to the spirit, where it's this story of two anti-heroes who kind of make each other worse. And, the question is Frankenstein's great sin delving into forbidden mysteries, or is it being a bad parent? But most Dracula movies don't even do that. So, first comes the Bela Lugosi 1931 Dracula. Then, and this is important more so than you might think, The Mummy. The Mummy stars Boris Karloff as the titular mummy, but it also has Edward Van Sloan as basically Van Helsing. They call him something else, but he's basically Van Helsing. And the same guy who is Jonathan as a dippy fiance, and the same music over the credits. It's basically the same. It's better, actually, but it's very clearly an attempt to remake Dracula with a more Orientalist flair. Not that there wasn't Orientalism in Dracula, but that's a whole different lecture. And that adds something that would become a recurring device, which is the idea that the human female love interest is the immortal villain's reincarnated wife. Now, I've tried to trace where this originally comes from. I think patient zero, so to speak, is H. Rider Haggard's She, a story involving actually this sort of goddess queen character who meets a hero who she thinks is her reincarnated love. And I think people have been building off that. So, The Mummy builds off Dracula. Then we get the Hammer movies, which were very careful not to be too much like the Bela Lugosi movies because they didn't want to get sued. That's all the Hammer movies are desperately trying not to be sued by Universal. It's funny if you know how to look. And because of that, I think that's one of the main reasons why Christopher Lee's role as Dracula is actually pretty small. The main character is really Peter Cushing's Van Helsing, who is also another excellent Van Helsing. And he actually mentions in interviews that he felt he couldn't do Van Helsing in the book, who sort of speaks in this sort of Dutch, English, sort of, I don't want to say pidgin, but so he played it as much more himself. Christopher Lee actually said he really wanted to do something more faithful to the books and use speeches from the book and so forth, but didn't happen. Then comes Dark Shadows. Now, Dark Shadows is like the original supernatural soap opera. And there had been a ghost, but it turned really supernatural with the introduction of the character Barnabas Collins, a vampire who is obsessed with his lost love. And here it's not so much reincarnation, but he keeps meeting women who look like or remind him of his lost love, and then doing this attempt at brainwashing them into being his lost love, which starts out as an explicitly evil thing, but then as audiences came to really like Barnabas, they start playing it as a bit more sympathetic, and your mileage may vary on whether that works or not. But this is clearly copying The Mummy, which is copying Dracula, the Bela Lugosi, and also H. Rider Haggard's She. Now, Dan Curtis made Dark Shadows, and then he went on to make a movie called Bram Stoker's Dracula, or as I call it, Dan Curtis's Bram Stoker's Dracula. And this copies his own Dark Shadows. Here, Dracula, played by Jack Palance, which is kind of a weird casting choice, but he does his best. Here, his reincarnated love is Lucy. And he really, he really is angry when she dies earlier, and so that's why he goes after Mina. It's specifically revenge. Actually, I think that makes a little more sense than having Mina be his reincarnated love, because then why would he go after Lucy first? So then, actually, I can't remember if it came before or after Dan Curtis's Bram Stoker's Dracula, but there's Blackula, where the character, he's not actually Dracula. He was turned by Dracula, who mocked him by calling him Blackula because he was an African prince. He searches for a woman who he believes to be his reincarnated lost love. So at this point we have Blackula, which is copying Dark Shadows and potentially, if I have the dates correct, Dan Curtis's Bram Stoker's Dracula, which are copying The Mummy, which are copying the Bela Lugosi Dracula, which is copying the Hamilton Dean play, Dracula. And of course, we do ultimately get one of the better known Draculas today, which is Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, which copies Blackula, and Dan Curtis's Bram Stoker's Dracula, which copies Dan Curtis's Dark Shadows, blah, blah, blah. And this plays heavy into the Mina as Dracula's reincarnated lost love. At no point does anyone ask why Dracula, who, whether you think he's supposed to be literally Vlad the Impaler or a descendant of his, would believe in reincarnation. He would have been either Catholic or Orthodox Christian in life. Why would he believe in reincarnation? But whatever, it's a device. A lot of people love Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, and I'll grant it is stunning to look at. The soundtrack is wonderful. The costume design is just out of the world. The actors are mostly very good. I say mostly. Poor Keanu, that was not his greatest moment. I just can't do it. I feel like Stephen King watching Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. I think we have kinship there, that sort of people praise it and we kind of grit our teeth and say, yes, it's a very good looking movie. Because this upsets me a little that they call it Bram Stoker's Dracula. People all the time quote that line, "I've crossed oceans of time to find you," and credit it to Bram Stoker and Dracula. It is not in the book Dracula. Mina is not his reincarnated lost love. She is not in love with him. There is sexual tension, but it's of the sexual assault variety. The vampire attack on her is pretty explicitly written as a metaphor for sexual assault. And then there are musicals. Frank Wildhorn, there's a bunch of European musicals, and all of them copy Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula and have Mina be his reincarnated lost love. And then we get Dracula Untold, which also copies Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula and all the movies, or all the musicals, and has Mina be his reincarnated lost love. And there's lots more minor Draculas that follow. So like I said, it's a game of telephone. Going back, even before all the reincarnated lost love stuff, Orson Welles, who did a very good radio play of Dracula. It's not entirely the book because they had to drastically shorten it, but it's very good. He's such a good Dracula. It's, I believe, on YouTube. You should look it up. He said that it would make a great movie, but no one's tried. Everyone's based it on the play. Oh, what I would have given for Orson Welles' movie of Dracula. But maybe in another universe, the movie Library of Babel. So it goes. So I have been in the past very snobby about this sort of thing. I'm trying not to be. I'm trying to understand, look, not everybody loves or even really cares about the novel Dracula. If they want to make Dracula and Mina true love, okay. Vampires are sexy. Go for it. I will dislike your version if she's his reincarnated wife. I am just so sick of that. I should mention in the process some Dracula movies that have spun off and done their own weird things. There's a 1977 miniseries that is almost close enough to the book, and that's probably because it's a miniseries and they have more time. They cast Louis Jourdan as Dracula, and he is very sexy. He was also a Columbo villain, which gives him some points in my eyes. And I say almost because they do, at the last moment, have some romance between him and Mina. But at least she's not his reincarnated wife, so some points there. There's Old Dracula with, I believe, David Niven, also known as Vampira, and that is... Why did they come up with this plot? Why did they do it? He does have a wife, and she gets brought back, but for some reason it turns her black, and she's happy about that, but he's not, so he's trying to turn her back white, and then the ironic conclusion is that he becomes black. And why did they think this was a good idea? I don't know. There's Mel Brooks' Dracula Dead and Loving It, which is entirely or almost entirely a riff on the 31 Dracula, but with some stuff from Fearless Vampire Killers and the musicals thrown in. It's not great, but there are some good moments in it. Then there's the 2004 miniseries with Mark Warren, which Discworld fans will know him as Mr. Tea Time. I feel like I'm the only person in the world, with the exception of a couple of my Tumblr friends, who likes this. Arthur Holmwood, Lucy's fiance, is the real villain because he invites Dracula in by joining a cult to cure his syphilis. But I like it because Dracula is genuinely freaky. He's very scary. Again, think Mr. Tea Time. Mina is not into him. His attack on her is very much played as sexual assault. And she fights against him very strongly. And David Suchet, one of my favorite actors, Agatha Christie's Poirot, is Van Helsing. And unfortunately, his role is pretty cut down. He was a prisoner of the cult, and he knows everything. But when I first read the book, David Suchet was my choice for Van Helsing. So it's not an accurate adaptation, but I feel it. I can't hate it. It's too it's too special. So, will we ever get an accurate film adaptation of Dracula? I don't know. I'm not holding my breath for it, but I think with the resurgence in popularity based on Dracula Daily, it's not impossible. We are getting more and more mini-series based on books. Think of The Terror, though I understand that also changed a lot from the book. So maybe we can hold out hope that someday there might be a strong, if not entirely faithful, then at least faithful to the main beats of the characters, mini-series of Dracula. In the meantime, if you want to watch Dracula movies, like I said, the only one I can wholeheartedly say is good is Nosferatu. But the others have their charm. I would recommend, I'd recommend, I think, the Hammer Horror of Dracula, although I prefer some of the sequels, Brides of Dracula, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, and Dracula AD 1972, which is so goofy but so dear to my heart. 31 Dracula, I'd say see it. Like I said, it has three great characters in it. Dark Shadows, I have a lot of fun with. That's the sort of show you binge and eventually you go, oh my God, I can't see another episode of this. And you put it aside for years and you see it, you know what, I should see more Dark Shadows. And, off and on like that. As I said, I don't like Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, but a lot of people do, so give it a chance. If you are not as hung up on the book as I am, you'll probably enjoy it. Like I said, it's gorgeous, and it's sort of, it's swooningly romantic, and I do like things that are swooningly romantic. So have fun reading the book, and you know what? Pour yourself a glass of wine, or if you do not drink wine, pomegranate juice or something. See some Dracula movies, laugh, form your own opinions. You don't have to agree with mine. And enjoy the weird twists and turns our culture has given us. Thanks.